Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. This episode is sponsored by Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. We are here today with Jeff Haden. He is the contributing editor for Inc. He's also the author of Motivation Myth. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to chat with you, Jeff. I've been seeing your content on LinkedIn. You're a LinkedIn, one of the elusive LinkedIn influencers. And
I'm excited because I looked at the list of people that you have talked to, and I do not belong on the list, but it's really cool to fall under their halos. So, it's positive by association. So I will take it.
I love it, man. So I listened to an interview that you did on my friend Dennis Brown's podcast, Growth Experts, a few days ago, and loved the conversation you guys had there. Before we dive into this, just want to talk a little bit about, you're contributing editor for Inc. You just wrote a book called Motivation Myth. We don't need to talk a whole lot about your book. We had talked offline a little bit about that, but I do want listeners to know kind of what was the thought behind kind of writing Motivation Myth, because I think it's a really interesting concept.
If I was going to sum it up, and I'll try to be really brief, I'm fortunate enough that I get to talk to a lot of really, really successful people. And then I get to talk to a lot of people who feel stuck or who don't feel like they're achieving the success that they would hope to achieve. And if I contrast the two themes from those two groups, the really successful people don't wait for motivation. They don't expect to get it from somewhere else. They create it on their own, even if they don't know that they are doing so. Whereas the people that feel stuck are waiting for some, and I always use the term lightning bolt, but it's appropriate. They're waiting for a lightning bolt to strike them that gives them all the passion, all the power, all the motivation they need to go off and chase this, huge, audacious, hairy goal, whatever that is that Jim Collins talks about. And so motivation is something that you can create. You don't have to wait. And if you find the right processes, then you can actually get little doses of motivation every day that will carry you for years and years and years. So that was the main impetus behind it, is to say to people who feel stuck, you don't have to be stuck. You have all the control that you need right in your hands. You just have to know how to exercise it.
Love it. And so when we were talking offline, Jeff, you'd mentioned a story at a conference that you were at recently. You asked everybody you said, hey, if you hate networking, raise your hand. And nobody raised their hand.
Yeah, it was like, I think it was about 3,000 people. And I don't even remember why. That wasn't part of my presentation, but it came up based on a question. And I just said, how many of you hate networking? Because I hate quote unquote networking. I like connecting with people, but I hate that formal process of networking. Yeah. And nobody raised their hands. And I thought, wow, it's clearly just me. But then afterwards, there was a reception, and I was talking to different people, and, they would kind of it was almost like they were whispering a secret to me, and they would say, honestly, I hate networking, but I didn't want to admit it in front of everybody, because we're all supposed to love networking because, that's how you succeed. You build a network, you have connections. And so I thought about that, and I thought, there are a lot of people, especially in your audience's business, where your network and your connections are really, really important. They can open doors for you. They can give you credibility. There's all kinds of reasons to have a very powerful network. But if you're like a lot of people, the process of building that seems really intimidating and scary and uncomfortable. And so I thought, well, the best way to overcome that, if you're a person who is struggling in that area, and it's exactly what I've done, is just to break it down and look around and say, okay, who out there is really good at networking? And by that, I don't mean that they just have lots of raw numbers, but who have you met that you connected with, and later on you thought, wow, that was really natural and it was unforced, and there's a bond, there's a connection there. We can do business together, if nothing else. think about a person that's done that and then think about, okay, how did they actually do that with me? And break it down into a process and then say to yourself, all right, next time, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach out to this person. I'm going to do it this way. There's tons of great wheels out there. You don't have to reinvent wheels. Create this process, follow your process. And when you have little successes, which you will, that will make you feel good. Makes you feel a little bit better about yourself, makes you feel a little bit more confident, and it will give you the motivation to keep on developing those skills. And at some point you'll look back, and even if you still don't love networking, you will be really good at it. But I would argue that you will probably reach a point where you, if not love it, at least like it, because we tend to like to do the things we are good at. You just have to get good at it. And so following a process and getting those little small wins that give you motivation, that's how you build up some new skill. So if you're a marketer and you've got certain things that you're great at, and you've got certain things where you're a little weaker, and improving those weaknesses would improve your career or your business, then look at the people who do well at those things, break down what they actually do, and then create a process that allows you to do those things, and you will develop the skill. And at some point you will find it's fun, because success is fun.
Can you explain, Jeff, what have been some of the processes that you've created for yourself and as you've developed skills throughout your career?
One of the ones that I actually reference in my book, I write for Inc. and I average about, 1.7 million readers a month, which I think is a pretty good number.
Yeah.
But I started at 0. And so I just thought, one of the things that works is to interview and write about people who are extremely successful, because it's fun to read about that and it's fun to learn from those people. But I couldn't go all the way to, Jack Welch, right away, because Jack Welch is not talking to me. Richard Branson's not talking to me. So I had to start where I could. So I just kind of laid out a process and said, okay, who can I get? And it tends to be people that, have a startup that, guy's got a new type of cat litter or something like that. I can get cat litter guy. And if I do well with that, and if it's interesting and it's informative and people get some value from it, that's great, because that helps me build an audience. But then that also lets me, if I reach for whoever's one level above cat litter guy, I can say, hey, I know you don't know much about me, but this is the kind of thing I do. Here's an example of something I did. And if they look at that and say, wow, I really like that, I can embrace that, then you can bump your way up. So in 3 years, I've been able to talk to, I've got Mark Cuban and Richard Branson and Jack Welch and Roger Penske, and I've got all these people that are really hard for the average person to get to, but I managed to get to because I followed a process. I didn't reach for them right away. I said, okay, how do I build something that gets there? And that's how any career, any hobby, any avocation, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, that's actually how you do it. There is no, I don't know anybody that has hacked their way to incredible success. Everyone I know that is really successful worked really hard, worked really smart, and kept their head down and focused on the day-to-day. And then at some point they popped their head up and said, wow, look how far I've come.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about this is that's the biggest demotivator of all, is when you set a really big goal and you focus on that goal all the time, which we are taught to do. When you are miles from that goal and yet you're always looking at it, the distance from here to there, it's insurmountable and it's demotivating, and it makes you think, God, I'll never get there, and I will just give up. But if your goal is just today, I'm going to do X and Y and Z, and if you complete X and Y and Z, you feel good. You did what you set out to do. That's great. That's fulfilling. That gives you the motivation tomorrow to go out and do your next X, Y, and Z.
Today's growth story is about how a big data platform increased the efficiency of their lead gen campaigns in a matter of weeks. Delphix, the company in the story, had hired an agency to manage their Google ads a few years ago, but they weren't seeing the results they wanted to see. Being such a technical B2B solution, they set out to find a team that could take on their challenge. After countless proposals, they found the perfect fit: Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. In just 1 week after launching Directive's campaigns, Delphix saw their lead volume double and their cost per lead drop by 60%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Jeff, a lot of folks listening would be really compelled by the fact that you're, a contributing editor for Inc. Was there a particular process or thing that you followed that ultimately led you to have the platform to be able to use Inc. as the platform that you get to reach folks with now?
It's a strange story. I'm also a ghostwriter. And so the problem with being a ghostwriter, and marketing folks will instantly understand this, the problem with being a ghostwriter is it's a lot like Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club is you can't talk about Fight Club. First rule of ghostwriting is you can't talk about who you work for. So if you're trying to market yourself, it's really hard when you have to stand in front of someone and say, I can't tell you who I've worked for. I can't show you anything I've done, but I promise I'll do a really good job. That doesn't go that far. And so my wife actually said, you really need some stuff in your name. And I said, nobody wants to read anything by me, but she was persuasive because she's usually right. And so I pitched, 10 or so of the major business sites at the time and said, you don't know me. Here's some stuff. I actually wrote some examples of things that I would do. And I said, I can't tell you who's on it, but I have a really big Rolodex and I can draw from a lot of people. And, and I even offered to do it. I offered to write for free because to me, it was just a marketing thing. It was like if I wrote something and if you read it and you liked it and you happened to be in the need of a ghostwriter, you might call me. It was a credibility thing for me. And so they took a chance on me, and it turned out that I did know how to attract an audience because I sat down and thought, okay, what do people like to read? But I flipped a couple things I discarded because I don't like doing controversial stuff, and I don't really like clickbait stuff. And, I'm not trying to just get attention any way I can. I want long-term readers. I want a long-term audience. And if you sell people out once, you never get them back. So I worked on that as well. But it was mainly just perseverance and then effort and then trying to do things that made me seem different than the average person so that if you read it, you thought, okay, I'm going to refer to myself in the third person. So sorry about that. But when you read it, you would, I know it sounds terrible, but work with me. When you read it, you would say, oh, okay, that's Jeff. Not, oh, okay, that could have been written by anyone. And it was something generic. I wanted it to feel like you thought, okay, I like that, hopefully. And I'll come back. And so that's part of how I got the audience that I did is just that I focused on the audience and what they needed. And I wanted to satisfy the audience. And I figured if I did that they would want to come back.
It makes sense. And what I like about what you said, Jeff, and I've heard other folks talk about this before. Where I was talking to Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor in chief at Entrepreneur the other day. And he was saying people, that it's so common for folks to lead with of just talking about how great they are. And Jason said, man, we're not trying to hire you. Like we care about the content and our readers. And so, what I like about what you just said, Jeff, is when you were thinking about what do readers want, and you were positioning yourself to say, hey, I can present ideas that are compelling to your readers, not, oh, look at how great I am. Look at all of my, pedigree of the things that I've done in the past. It was much more centric around the value you can add to readers. And it seems like all the folks that I talk to that are contributing for these larger publications have that same mindset of the reader comes first, if you will, the how can I add the most value? And even in the way you just articulated, how you headline your content and how you think about kind of your content themes and the things that you're wanting to write about. It's centric around, I want to be a unique voice that people come to for the long term. So I really appreciate it.
And if I can extend that, since a lot of your folks are content marketers, I get pitched by a lot of companies that would like some kind of coverage. And many of them, the pitch is based on, here's what we would like to tell people. Well, what you want to tell people is usually not particularly interesting to the people that you're trying to talk to. So I always tell people, say you've started a company. Your ramen noodle story has been told 1,000 times. Maxed out credit card stories have been told 1,000 times. But what have you learned in starting this company that other entrepreneurs can benefit from and maybe won't have to make the same mistakes? What advice, guidance, tips, practical stuff can you provide? And if we do that in the article, you get to bask in the reflected glow of your wit and wisdom. People will think well of your company or of you. They will check out what you do because you provided some value to them. But if it's all just about, here's my marketing message, but I'm going to pretend that this is an interview or an article, nobody reads it, which I don't want because I want readers. That's how I get paid. Yep. And you don't want really, because coverage without people reading about it is worthless to you. So, the smart people that are marketing their companies realize that you serve the reader first and your company will then benefit. Serve yourself and nobody benefits.
You're spot on. You're spot on, Jeff. This has been fantastic. If there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you. Obviously, I would assume they can get Motivation Myth anywhere, Amazon, bookstores, but they want to stay connected with you. What's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Write for Inc. It's Inc.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I do connect with people, and I do respond. Maybe not within 24 hours, but I will respond if you have questions or want to talk. Or, I like to connect people. So if there's someone you're trying to get to, and there is a valid reason to get to them, and it is beneficial to the person on the other end, not just to you.
So you're saying you don't dole out Mark Cuban introductions to just anyone.
But that's the whole thing about networking. We talked about that early on. If your goal when you network is to provide something to someone else that needs it, if that's your primary goal, then you can build an incredible network. If your goal is to get, and that's your only goal, you can get a lot of numbers, but you're not going to actually get people. So if you like to connect, I'm happy to, and I'm happy to connect you with people as long as your goal is to make it at least mutually beneficial for you and that other person. If not, more beneficial to the other person.
Love it. Jeff, well, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value, so I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, you're welcome. It was an honor for me to be on your show. Thanks.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.